Hello there, my name is Leo and welcome to another making of my newest animation, FIFA's Downfall and Ronaldo's Divine Comedy. In this making of, I will show you some insights in how I managed to pull off this animation. If you haven't checked out the animation yet, I can highly recommend watching it. It is a lovely story of Ronaldo trying to summon the new EA Sports brand FC because FIFA will not exist in EA's hands anymore in the next year. Check it out so everything in this making of kinda makes more sense. However, I also gotta say that I'm not the biggest fan of this animation myself. So I also want to talk about some of the things that did not work out or why they didn't work out, and in general. There are three things that I want to focus on in this making of. That is, on the one hand, the sculpting and in general the creation of the transformed Ronaldo. The second thing is the cloth simulation that's happening in the animation. And third and last, I want to talk about assets that I created for this animation, because I use a lot of fluid animations in all my stuff, so I decided to create some reusable assets that in the future will provide me with a very simple way of achieving good looking blood explosions, for instance. I found a model of Ronaldo ripped from one of the older FIFA games online, and because I wanted to have some kind of monster version of Ronaldo, I knew that I had to deploy some sculpting to actually achieve the final form that I was looking for. What you're seeing right now is just the upper body of Ronaldo, so I'm just gonna focus on the upper body on this one. Sculpting is, well, at least in theory, kinda simple. Sculpting is a pretty damn intuitive way of adding detail to a model. If I, for example, want to add some more spikes on the shoulders, then I can, for example, select the snake hook and then quite literally, that's a bit too much, I can just pull them out. Let's do it like that, do it like this. And as you can see, here you go, 2 new spikes. On top of that, if you want to have some smaller detail like the veins going in here, for example, you could, for instance, use the crease brush to create some fine lines. Let's actually invert those lines. Let's create some veins going on in here. Let's try to smooth it a little bit so that they are not as extreme. And as you can see, now I added some more veins. So it is very intuitive, it is a very fun way, and I did not anticipate it to work as well as it did. I have, as I said, few experience in sculpting, but that worked out pretty damn well. I am really happy how this turned out, even though I have to admit that the final design of the transformed Ronaldo looks kinda generic. However, the base mass and especially the way of approaching it with the sculpt, the biggest issue with sculpting something is that it has a ridiculously high poly count. Using this mesh in production is a very bad idea because, as you can see, we almost have 2 million vertices, which is way too much for an animation. As you can see on the left side on here, I have retopologized the body with a low resolution version. If you see it in comparison here, the hand on the left side, the hand on the right side, this is a very low poly object. In fact, if I isolate it, we barely have 5,000 vertices, which is wonderful. And I used this low poly mesh to bake the normals from the high poly mesh, and that worked out pretty damn well. Now, as you can see, the mesh on the left side looks almost identical to the right side, with the obvious exception that the other mesh does not have the added spikes and the added veins which we added on the higher res topology. They are not represented in the low poly mesh because everything has to be baked down to a normal map again to reflect these changes that we've made on high res mesh on the low res mesh. But as you can see, the difference is devastating. This is such a low poly object, which makes it perfect for animation because it is hardly drawing any performance at all, whereas it has all of the detail that the high-res topology has. I will certainly do that next time I will work on some fancy characters, because this worked pretty well. I have a low-res mesh with all the details from the high-res mesh, which basically merges the capability of using this in real time with the amount of detail that I can get with a high-res sculpt. Let's now have a look at the cloth simulation that I mentioned before. And on the left hand side, which I'm right now moving, you can see a free camera floating around, whereas on the right side, a little bit smaller, you can see the animation going on. The cloth dynamics, that is also something that worked out better than expected. I will now try to play the animation. Sadly, it is laggy as hell. As you can see, this is the real speed that the animation is progressing at, which is horrible. The cloth simulations were a problem. They worked out pretty much fine, but the thing is, the longer I kept on simulating the cloth covering the main character, the more it was likely to fall onto the ground, which got me to implement a very interesting solution for that. Whenever, as you can see on the right side, this is the camera view, whenever the character was not in frame, I actually deactivated the cloth. If he, however, re-entered the frame, like for example in this case, it is he's right here, he's down here on the left side, I reactivated the same mesh but with a different cache. I basically simulated for each and every scene that you see the character on screen with a cloth applied to it, another cloth mesh, because that kept it from falling to the ground. And I basically continued doing that throughout the whole animation until the final moment where it gets to the altar. It switches to the final cloth stage with the final cloth cache. It is the main cloth stage 6, so there are basically 6 different caches for 6 different geometries. They are all the same, but the simulation basically started at a different point in time, which enabled me to get the cloth simulation I desired. Let's talk about the last thing that I would like to mention before going on to a small conclusion for myself for this animation, and that is the creation of assets for all the different stuff. The thing is, I use blood and in general fluid simulations a whole lot of times in my animations, and whenever I do that I have to redo all of them, which is annoying. So with the new asset, well, kinda new asset library that Blender provides, I came up with the idea to create an asset for these fluid simulations that I could drag and drop into a file and, well, call it a day. What you are looking right now is basically a fully set up liquid simulation. There's an empty in there, and that empty is the emitter of the fluid. And I applied some noise and in general some modifiers to it so I could have some very splashy behavior. I set that up in a way that I basically can drag and drop the blood simulation. It finished baking and now I have a lovely splurty blood animation ready to go. As you can see, it looks good, it looks lush, it is already set up with a blood material, so it is a very easy and intuitive way to get some blood simulation going on in there. Because as I said, this is marked as an asset, so I can quite literally drag and drop this thing into all of my animations, and because everything is driven by this, let's kill the cache for a second there, because everything is driven by this empty, I can obviously put a constraint on this empty and, for example, put this on a character's head. So when his head explodes, this actually moves with the head. Let's get to my personal conclusion of this animation, and I have to admit that yeah, well, I'm kinda disappointed in it. I was searching for another word, but I wanna be honest with you guys, I'm kinda disappointed in the outcome of this animation. I feel like this animation is neither as funny and gory as Jackass 5, because even though Jackass 5 is kinda wonky, is kinda janky, it is a lot of fun to watch because it is just stupid. It is just pure stupidity, 4 characters doing stupid things with a little bit of blood and gore thrown in. I had a lot of fun watching that, whereas for example the other animation, did you already say what the fuck today? That is something similar. It is a crazy animation where somebody goes to a toilet and then he shits himself, his head explodes, and in general it is an animation that is also kinda janky, but on the other hand it makes yourself curious about the animation. So on the one hand I have Jackass 5, which is a fun animation with a little bit of blood and gore, and on the other hand the Did You Already Say What the Fuck Today, which is kinda the same thing but also with some horror theme going on in it, and now I have this animation. This animation was not conceptualized to be janky and wonky as the other 2 animations, and I have a feeling that that's actually its biggest problem, because my animation, for example, I like literally the character animation, is not good. Everything just does not look good. The image quality itself is also pretty damn poor. That's because every single frame only had 25 seconds of rendering time, which is not a lot, especially not for a 1080 Ti. And it just seems like my 1080 Ti is not up for lengthy animations like that anymore, at least in an acceptable quality. But on top of that, the thing is, I just didn't really felt this animation because it was not this, let's say, innocent, wonky, let's have some fun, bloody, gory animation like Jackass 5, for example, or did you already say what the fuck today? But I rather wanted to tell at least somewhat serious story. Serious, obviously in quotation marks, because the topic itself, that's obviously not that serious, but it was not designed about the concept of being janky and wonky. Let's say it like that. And I feel like without the jankiness, without the wonkiness, in conjunction with the shitty animation quality of mine, and in general the poor image quality, and it just all in all accumulated to an animation which is not bad, but not as fun as the other two, and I'm kinda disappointed in that. My main problem is basically that you hardly see the time and effort that I put into this project. Without any doubt at all, this was my most ambitious animation up to date, and I do not feel like you see that. I felt like Jackass 5 is the more interesting animation, even though I put much more time and effort into this animation, at least that's my opinion. The last 10 seconds were the transformed Ronaldos in this empty room. I think that looks wonderful. I think that was also the last scene that I worked on, and the animation quality is much better. It does not only look much better than the rest of the animation, in fact I actually would go as far as to say that the last scene was basically the best thing about this whole animation. Sometimes you have to do an animation or put work into a project that gonna totally suck at the end of it to learn what is going on and what you have to improve. It is what it is. I had a lot of fun. I'm really damn glad that I did this animation, but it certainly showed me where my limits are and that I have to work on these limits. This is it. This was it. This is the end of the making of my newest animation. Feel free to comment how you thought the animation was, if you agree with me that it is not as good as the other ones, or maybe if you really enjoyed it, I don't know. Please write that down into the comments. Well, this is it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and well, I hope you have an awesome day.